This is going to be my first preview for the Lions Week 2 matchup against the Buccaneers. Playoff rematch, another playoff rematch in 2 games. Kind of ironic. I'm going to focus this one on the Detroit defense in particular, the pass rush and the defensive backs that are going to be responsible for guarding what appears to be a very talented group of wide receivers with the addition of rookie wide receiver Jalen McMillan. And then Baker Mayfield, who was incredibly smooth last week. He did throw for 289 and 4 touchdowns. Very efficient last week. 24 of 30 passing in their Week 1 win over the Commanders. Almost 400 yards of offense. He was only sacked once. Guys like Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, names that everybody knows because they're the top 2 receivers in Bucs history overall in terms of receptions and touchdowns. And then McMillan, they all had an impact. Look, Tampa Bay scored on 7 of 8 possessions against Washington. I'm not counting the final kneel down where the Bucs had the ball. They're already ahead by 17, and the backup quarterback Trask goes in there and takes a knee twice. They looked really good in the passing game, particularly the downfield passing game, and I'm going to focus on that here. It's going to be a different threat, I think, than the Rams last week, where Matthew Stafford was throwing the ball short, incredibly short, often into the flats, basically towards the sideline, shorter than 6 or 8 yards. Mayfield was able to find multiple guys across the width and the depth of the field. I think it's a little bit more spread out passing game, maybe perhaps unpredictable. And what I mean by that is a lot of the Rams passing plays, you guys know if you watched my content last week, I think are generally predetermined against man, and even zone to some extent. Stafford pretty much knows where he's going with the football. There's one read. Maybe you get to the second guy. That's about it. Perhaps that sounds like a oversimplification to you, but this is a more organic passing attack in my opinion. Mayfield's going to get through the reads quick. And he does not care who's open. That's my point. It's not, I don't think, as predetermined. Maybe there's a better word than predetermined with this passing offense. On the flip side, last week, the Rams' passing attack it was effective. Stafford completed 34 of 49 passes against the Lions. A lot of them were quick throws to the flats, though. Many of you guys in the comments section talked about that. The word inefficient was used twice. It did take Cooper Kupp 21 targets to get those 14 catches. Only generated 110 yards from that. That's 5.2 yards per target. That's extremely low. If you were to take out the 63-yard catch and run by Tyler Johnson, which is somewhat anomalous, the Lions defended that route properly and tackled Johnson 3 times. Well, twice, excuse me. The third time, Stafford didn't throw it. On that particular instance of it, I think Carlton Davis III falls down. Brian Branch is kind of over-leveraged to the sideline, and Johnson puts his foot in the ground, turns it upfield for 63 yards. If you were to take that out, I mean, it counts, right, in terms of the stats. But if you take that out, then the Rams average 7.7 yards per catch. So you have this really interesting dynamic, if you ask me, of the Bucs want to throw the ball downfield a little bit more. I don't mean necessarily deep than the Rams did last week. So how does it set up? Well, first of all, Tampa Bay, I think that O-line is really good when they're completely healthy. They did allow 40 sacks in 2023. So that was but there's a ton of teams that are there at 39, 40, 41 sacks allowed. So I guess you could say middle of the pack. But to me, I look at that offensive line as better than middle of the pack, to be honest with you. They do have a rookie in Graham Barton at center. That'll be an interesting matchup with Aleem McNeil, DJ Reader, and more on that later in terms of film. I will have some film of Hutchinson and Davenport here. Davenport is apparently questionable. I think that's really unfortunate because he played well against the Rams, in my opinion. I'll get the film started here with some of the stuff that the Lions did last year in the division playoff win to take home a 31-23 win. Look, Baker Mayfield did throw for 350 in that one, 349 to be precise, on 41 attempts. So pretty good in terms of yards per attempt and yards per catch. Mike Evans, 8 catches and a touchdown. I think this is a good matchup between the Lions' pass defense and the Bucs' offense skill positions. Lions, in my opinion, are going to need to generate some pass rush here, and if Davenport is out, that's a big loss. This is a offensive line, however, that's missing the right tackle. They have a rookie center and a new left guard in Ben Bredeson, who came over from the Giants last year. I'm not saying that I expect the Lions to suddenly put up a ton of quarterback pressures, but it's an interesting dynamic with some variables. So a little bit of film from last year, how the Lions defended the Bucs. They brought a lot of pressure. This is obviously the game-sealing interception. The Bucs are able to get the ball back here with 1:39 left. It's 31-23. Still have some questions about why they went for 2 and put themselves in that position, but this is just one of the most amazing plays that I've. Derek Barnes is a solid football player. He's very versatile. He can play on the line of scrimmage and off. It's one of the benefits of having him out on the field often. And perhaps if Davenport is out, he's going to be out there more. Now, this is a passing situation late in the game, so you can see it's a very different look defensively from the structure you'll normally see in a run-pass situation. But Barnes has the ability to drop out from the line of scrimmage. And I'd mentioned this multiple times when I broke this down last year. I just love how he's identifying the receiver, settling underneath. I would call this a 4-2, cover 2, but the corner to the downside, Cam Sutton, is playing a little bit at depth. Obviously, that one sealed a trip to the NFC Championship game. I know it's a good memory for you guys. End zone angle, same play. They brought a lot of pressure, and it was often characterized by 2 blitzers going through the same gap. Now, I don't want to say, carelessly or that it wasn't sound. It was very intentional and strategic. They were oftentimes, first guy engaging a blocker, either a running back or an offensive lineman, and then second of all, the other blitzer, the second blitzer through, being able to fit correctly. So I wonder how much pressure they're going to bring in light of the fact that they brought a ton of pressure last year. Here happens to be an edge blitz by Brian Branch. I would like to see Branch up there more often, to be honest with you. I understand that the perception is that he's going to play too high safety more. I just think he's a nuclear talent down there at the nickel position. So we'll see. But blitzing, bringing pressure, I thought was what they had to do last year at times in order to generate pressure against, in this matchup specifically, let's be precise. In this matchup against that offensive line last year, which was very talented, to get pressure on the quarterback, they needed to blitz. They don't necessarily need to this year, perhaps, but if Davenport's out and you can't get as much pressure on the other side, you may have a similar dynamic. Branch at the nickel position, like I said, at the second level, in my opinion, is you're going to put Amik Robertson there sometimes, don't get me wrong. I am very interested in how they get this done because Amik Robertson is not a safety. He's not a guy that has played safety before. I'd like to get those 2 guys on the field at the same time. Perhaps Branch is the boundary side safety. Kirby Joseph is the field side safety. And Amik Robertson is the nickel. This is the 2-point conversion after the Bucs had scored to make it 31-23. Like I said, I still don't understand it, why you go for this now. Just to get a tie, you have to hit a 2-point conversion. I know there's going to be people who come on here and talk about math and stuff. Like, it just doesn't make sense to me as someone who's been around the game for a while, but maybe I'm just not smart enough to get it. Let's take a look at 2 more plays that I think kind of illustrate the pass game and the effect that Barnes can have if he is lined up there near the line of scrimmage. There happen to be a couple of sacks that work out in the Lions' favor. First of all, Barnes on the line, even when they weren't blitzing last year, it felt like they were threatening it. And in this case, Barnes and Campbell are both dropping out. Hutchinson is the beneficiary. Baker Mayfield is obviously not. Because on the snap, Anzalone's blitzing. He's basically becoming the 4th rusher. This is a 3rd and 4, so they're in a rush situation, basically dime. And Barnes is dropping out of here, and you'll see Mayfield is looking to this side. I didn't show you all 22 because the point that I'm trying to make is if you have to play Derek Barnes more and move him up on the line of scrimmage, it might not be a bad thing at times. The guy is very versatile, particularly into the boundary. You can see he gets in the window there, basically, of what Baker Mayfield was trying to do. One more example of what I'm talking about. This is against 12 personnel, so this is a 2nd and 9. I think this is first possession of the game, to be honest with you, but I could be wrong. And it's a stunt, meaning Aiden Hutchinson is stunting to the inside gap. He's pinching inside to the B gap, and Kaminsky is pinching inside to the A gap. Why? Because off the edge to our left, to the field side, Melifonwu, as the safety who moved across, is coming on a blitz. Baker Mayfield, again, looking over to our right-hand side. And guess who dropped out there? Derek Barnes. He's a guy who I think they could look at if Davenport is out. Maybe not pass rush situations to replace Davenport, but to allow themselves to be more multiple in these early down situations. Like I said, 12 personnel, possibility of a run pass down, play action. Barnes is a guy who can drop off into the flats and create some coverage, allow them to bring someone else in the blitz, whether it's an inside linebacker or a safety. Tampa Bay's pass pro held up pretty good last week in most situations. Here you have a stunt where they're bringing two inside linebackers up the middle, and Farrell, the defensive end, ends up being the beneficiary of the sack. Frankie Lavue, a free agent signing, and then Bobby Wagner looping over the top. Kind of an example of what I'm talking about. I'm not advocating for six-man rushes to be used often. The point I'm actually trying to make here is I think the Bucs offensive line can still be pretty good despite losing the right tackle, having a rookie center. I think they're very well coached. I have no idea who the offensive line coach is, but to find pressures in their game, at least last week against Washington, is few and far between. Here it happens to be one of them. Baker Mayfield, who's playing with a lot of confidence, happens to get out of there, throw it incomplete. How do you get pressure on them? Be unpredictable, in my opinion. I don't think you can just line up in an organic four-man rush, especially if Davenport is out. I don't think you can line up in an organic four-man rush and win consistently and be able to get there such that Baker Mayfield isn't going to be able to get through his progressions. He's a high-level professional quarterback playing very well in that system. I think this is a different type of challenge from a quarterback passing game standpoint than it was last week against the Rams. Let's look at some film of Tampa Bay's passing attack to try to prove it. So when I say that I think Baker Mayfield's playing really well right now, he's spreading the ball out among multiple receivers. I'm going to focus on Evans, Palmer, who's a second-year player, and then McMillan, the rookie. We'll get to Chris Godwin film here in a moment. First of all, Baker Mayfield is going to sit there and throw the football. This is a 3rd and 6. So he's just like Matthew Stafford and a lot of quarterbacks in the NFL, obviously, that are willing to take the shot in order to get the completion. This happens to be Mike Evans, a little sail out, deeper out concept, while the number 1 receiver, who's actually a tight end, is running a vertical. Mike Evans lines up as the number 3 receiver. That's the read side, at least from what I have seen so far. So meaning if Mike Evans is here to trips, that's the read side. In this case, you have Evans, Godwin, and the tight end to the outside. It's quite obvious to me that he's working the 2 to 3 relationship, meaning Godwin and Evans. I think you've got to have someone leverage side on Evans to push him out. Not necessarily just for this play concept, but I would like to funnel him to the outside such that you kind of force Evans and Godwin's routes to release together, both to the outside. I feel like it could clear some things up for the safeties. Going to handle number 1 man. It's a great catch by Evans, obviously. Baker Mayfield gets rid of the ball quick. Perhaps not as quick as Matthew Stafford. This is a quad set, 4 receivers to the bottom side of the screen, Evans up top. Beautiful ball by Baker Mayfield. Originally, when I saw this from the All-22, I thought it was too low, meaning I thought the angle was too low, but he's basically throwing it out there in front of him. 4-man rush, 1st and 10, throwing it backside from a 4-by-1 set, so really isolating that corner. Evans is able to go get it. Obviously, he's the franchise leader in catches, yards, touchdown. Touchdowns. Godwin's number 2, by the way. Same play, end zone angle. So Terrion Arnold, Carlton Davis III, they're going to be stressed on that backside, whether it's trips. So trips or quads, which is more anomalous. But as you see, they line him up anywhere to the trips, to the backside as the X. Palmer to me is a unique player. The combination of him and McMillan being 3rd and 4th receivers, if you will, is pretty interesting if you ask me, because as they're going to have Godwin and Evans on the field. So McMillan, I think, played 22 snaps last week, somewhere in that range. This is a cover 2 that Washington's playing. And when I say that Baker Mayfield's playing well, if you hedge at all too far in one direction, he is on it. Forbes down here isn't being selfish. He's not being greedy, but he's hanging out. To me, he's hanging out a little bit too much on this underneath route. But we have the benefit, obviously, of seeing the route combination multiple times. I actually like showing it multiple times for you and for me. I feel like I gain understanding the more I watch it. In this case, Palmer's running like, I always call this smash in. And then Godwin's just kind of sitting this down. Sometimes you bring this route to the inside, hence the in portion of it. But Forbes, to me, is just hanging out a little bit too much on that route. Too tight on a 2nd and 14 for me. I'd like to see him at probably the 46 or the 45. Give him a chance to get over here and really get in the window for Mayfield to perhaps not even throw the football. McMillan had 1 touchdown on his lone catch, 32-yard touchdown. I think they were first play of the fourth quarter. Speedster. I think Washington suffered some injuries during his career. I think 2022, 2023, somewhere in that area, was dealing with injuries. He's the motion man, and again, you've got a deeper corner route and then an underneath route that's holding the outside leverage defender. The ball is already out, but yes, he's wide open, so it's an easy throw from that standpoint. But the point for me is the recognition for Baker Mayfield. How can you interrupt that? Trying to be multiple, not risk too much on the back end. Some of the straight man stuff, I would probably say you should maybe avoid as much as possible, but we know there's times where they're going to bring pressure. McMillan, as an aside, could have had 2 touchdowns, number one. Number two, I also think this shows you, this is an illustration that I don't think Baker Mayfield cares who he throws the football to. It's a DPI on Forbes down here at the bottom side of the screen. McMillan's going to give a slight movement to the outside, ever so slight, and then bring this back to the post. I just like how early and soon the ball was thrown. Look at this. The move hasn't even been made yet by McMillan, and Baker Mayfield is already setting up to throw the football. The ball is out before McMillan made his move, so he trusts his guys. Maybe McMillan has made a lot of plays in camp. Certainly is a talented guy coming from a great offense in college, like I said, at Washington, but I think this is an illustration that's a different type of quarterback from the way it plays out on the field. I'm not saying Matt Stafford doesn't go through his reads at all, that he can't that he can't trust multiple guys down the field, but the way that it worked out last week, the short passing game, basically a ball control passing game, was the game plan, functionally. That is not necessarily what Baker Mayfield wants to do, at least as it relates to those 3 receivers I just showed you there. The kind of exception to that, and a player that I'm going to identify as someone the Lions have to pay special attention to and really limit, is Chris Godwin. You certainly can't give up big plays, and I think Mike Evans will be a huge part of their game plan. But to me, I think you've got to limit Chris Godwin as much as possible. The matchups that he's going to get against the nickel defenders or maybe outside corners at times, I think are important. You recall last week the 1 third down that I thought was maddening blitz by Meek Robertson. I mean, it's Aaron Glenn's call. I would not blitz the nickel to twins, especially a stacked twins, once this week. Godwin and Baker Mayfield, and these guys execute these screens really well, and in fact, thought their screen game last week to running backs was good. As an aside, this is Mike St. Ristel playing the nickel on the blitz. There's just too much space here. This ends up being, I mean, how do you want to call this? Last week for the Lions against the Rams, that play I'm talking about where Robertson blitzed, it ended up being a 3-on-2 in the Rams' favor. What do you want to call this? 3-on-2? You want to call this 5-on-3? Whatever you call it, it's piss poor alignment post-snap by Washington. I don't think you blitz the nickel once when it's a hold downfield on Tampa Bay, so the play comes back. But to me, Godwin is a guy that makes plays underneath. If you want to call him a possession receiver, go right ahead. I'm not a huge fan of those types of phrases being applied. He's made plays down the field before, but comparing him to McMillan and Palmer, yes, there is a speed differential. This ends up working out like a China in, and then Baker Mayfield is going to get pressure. He's going to be getting ready to throw the football and see someone possibly in the window and then step up further. I think this is an indication of how smooth and efficient he is playing right now. Doesn't see anything at the moment down here to the read side. And then this defender here is going to flash in his vision in front of his face. He pulls the football down, finds Godwin, ends up being an 11-yard gain. That's on a 3rd and 7. I think this is a better Bucs offense perhaps than you saw last year come to Detroit. 3rd and 3, Godwin, tough catch against Forbes over the middle on a slant. He's a strong receiver. There's a lot of contact, obviously. That matchup, whether he's matched up against the nickel, Amik Robertson or Brian Branch, or the outside corners, I think Godwin's someone that's got to be shut down. Another matchup to the top of the screen. This one again against Mike St. Riestel, who kind of will lose his balance a little bit near the bottom of the numbers to the sideline. It's just an out concept on a third down. This is an important situation, if you ask me. These third downs where Godwin is on the field and you're playing man, there's going to be matchups that guys have to win, especially when he's lined up inside. And finally, if we didn't see enough of it last week, you may see some again as these pick rub concepts that are allowed by the offense to run, which is fine with me. Actually, Mike Evans, I think, does a little bit of a poor job of trying to get to the outside shoulder of St. Riestel. But this is very similar to a lot of the stuff that the Rams did last week, obviously. And Godwin is the inside receiver hesitating and then running the shoot route out into the flat. St. Riestel being basically screened, shielded, whatever you want to call it, by Evans. Easy touchdown, 4 yards. Baker Mayfield, 4 touchdowns last week. I thought the pass game was impressive. I'm not saying that they're not a team that's going to try to run the ball as well. They averaged, I think, 5.8 yards per carry last year in the divisional playoff game, only generated like 88, 89 yards. My point is, when you watch the passing game that the Bucs put out there on film against Washington, I think Washington's a far inferior defense to Detroit's. The flavor of it was quite different. Spreading the ball around to multiple receivers. That particular play I just showed you is conceptually extremely similar to a lot of stuff Cooper Kupp benefited from. Into the boundary to Matt Stafford's left as well. But the tone and tenor of this passing game is more of a spread passing game attack, less focused on one player and more focused on Baker Mayfield making the right decisions and just getting the ball to the correct receiver, no matter who it is. So the question on some level, from a general standpoint, is how many players are the Lions going to have to allocate to the pass rush to get pressure related to Davenport possibly being out, such that the coverage on the back end is still sound? Baker Mayfield threw for 350 last week, 24 of 30, extremely efficient. I think you're looking to hold him to 270, 275, and reduced efficiency level. So 22 of 37, somewhere in that range, I think probably is the production or the output from proper choices by Aaron Glenn and the defensive staff in terms of coverage / blitz. They will not have a compromised tackle on both sides of the field. Nonetheless, I think that the way that it'll work out from a pass rush standpoint could be similar because of Matthew Stafford's ability to get the ball out quick, and I think a lot of his throws are, again, I hesitate to use the word predetermined, but he pretty much knew where he was going with the football. I think that speeds up the process, and I know some people are not going to like that, the way that that's described, particularly the fact that Matthew Stafford played for the Lions, and he played extremely well. You're looking at a guy who's on a Hall of Fame track probably, but I think part of the reason he's able to get the ball out so quick is so many things are predetermined. There's so much work being done pre-snap by Sean McVay to create leverage for players like Cooper Kupp. Again, those motions into the boundary that allow Stafford to know if it's zone and or man. He ends up pretty much being aware of where he is going to go with the football if it's man, and then moving off of it if it's zone. I think this is a very good example. You kind of have the camera in the way here for a moment, but he's looking to the left where Kupp just motioned over, and the tight end is kind of clearing out the linebackers for a moment. And really you have, if you ask me, a pick shield concept down the field, not a horizontal one like I showed you the Bucs touchdown to Chris Godwin a moment ago, like we saw the touchdown to Cooper Kupp on the return motion against Carlton Davis when Carlton Davis fell down. This is one that I think is a read by the Rams receivers. If it is zone, you, the tight end, are going to run to the outside shoulder of the inside linebacker. I would say this is a vertical shield concept such that Nakua can fit underneath of Jack Campbell. Hopefully I said that in a way that makes sense. Feel free to look for other analysis that explains pick, rub, or shield concepts, maybe better than I do. But my point is Baker Mayfield is going to be reading the defense from a more global perspective and not so focused on just one player or just one read. And then can the Lions benefit from that and generate a little? Is he going to hold on to the football a little bit longer than Matthew Stafford did last week? Yes. Is he capable of getting the ball out quick? Of course, some of the throws that I showed you earlier, he's getting rid of the ball quick, like that check X touchdown to Evans out of quads. So I think the dynamic is still vastly different, even though the offensive line play could be consistent, because I think the Bucs are, I think this is an underrated offensive line. Hutchinson is going to be called upon to try to win his matchup over there against the right tackle. Often it's going to be a backup right tackle. I can't remember exactly how to say the guy's name. Gadecki, I believe, is out, like completely out. They're also missing 2 defensive starters, so I think that's a dynamic that could be a part of the consideration in terms of blitzes and trying to get pressure. I was a little perturbed last week during the game, but a couple of comments were somewhat sobering that, hey, they gave up a ton of short passes. The guys competed out there on the outside, particularly Alex Anzalone, who I'm not focusing on at all in this video. The threat is different this week with the Bucs. They're going to throw the ball downfield more, intermediate passes more, perhaps. And I think the element of Davenport, whether he is there or not, is a huge factor, because he did play quite well last week. I have said in film study videos over the summer, well, late summer, as we got into training camp, that I didn't think he was a natural pass rusher, a guy who was going to give you 8 or 10 sacks. I feel like he's more of a bigger, stronger, bulkier guy that plays against the run well. I still think that'll play out over the course of the season. I did think that he got a little tired as the game got on, and this is kind of an example. This stance, pre-snap, kind of really slow get off, but he's a veteran. He's very smart. When he was tired, in my opinion, he just used the bull rush. Having James Houston IV there as a guy who could rush the passer on some of these third downs. This one happens to be the second down interception by Stafford. Really poor decision by him and just nothing on the throw. Even if Kirby Joseph isn't there, Brian Branch is going to be in position to defend the play, make a big hit. It's a hospital ball, if you will. I think Davenport, if he plays, is a somewhat dangerous proposition. Depending on the nature of the severity of the injury, I wouldn't want him to play if he's at all compromised and possibly put himself in jeopardy to being injured long term, because at this point it looks like the Lions need him unless James Houston IV can be more reliable and return to some of that magical form that we saw in 2022. I tried to package plays together here that I think show the difference in the passing game, even though to some degree there are parallels, because I think the offensive line for the Bucs is, unless you bring heavy pressure, unless you allocate 5 rushers consistently, the Bucs offensive line is going to hold up in most cases, and then the coverage on the back end will have to be pretty solid. But you'll have one more defender. If you rush 4, you can drop 7 in coverage or play other versions of man or split field coverage just to kind of force Baker Mayfield to go to that third read. I think the Lions defensive secondary will be trusted horizontally more, and was tested horizontally more, last week against the Rams. It'll be tested vertically a little bit more this week, not giving up the big play, matching up with Evans' physicality and ball skills at the catch point, dealing with those young receivers who have more speed, Palmer and McMillan, and then trying to match up with Godwin, prevent him from some of those underneath receptions. It looks like he's a really classic third down, a reliable guy on third down for Baker Mayfield. This is going to be an interesting game. The screen game I didn't really cover much, but their screens looked smooth and efficient and well run against Washington last week. I'm not sure that Washington is a very high-level defense to me, even though they have some good names over there. Bobby Wagner obviously has been an elite inside linebacker for a long time. I'm not sure that Washington has a very good defense, and I could be wrong in this evaluation. I could be proven wrong soon. But I think as we get into the season, my suspicion is that Washington's defense is going to lag down in the lower third of the league, will be my guess. And so what we saw last week from a Bucs perspective might be too efficient, might be unrealistic. The Lions are going to challenge things. Aaron Glenn is going to play some man and force those receivers to deal with people touching them, contact, challenging them for space. And so I'm interested in this game. I think that the Lions have a great opportunity to go to 2-0, particularly with an early bye. Getting to a 2-0 start would be fantastic if you ask me. I didn't talk about the aspect of DJ Reader coming back, but from a simplistic standpoint, I've said this many times, he will be exceptional against the run. to him and away from him, and I think it'll just create more 2nd and 8s and create more 3rd and 6s, where really, at this point, I think it's pretty obvious that's going to be the difference in the game. Do the Lions win most of those 3rd and 6s, or is Baker Mayfield able to get the ball to Godwin, utilize some screens, rely on Evans as the backside X, and keep the Bucs offense on the field? I look for a game that's similar to the division round playoff game. I'll hopefully have an offensive preview out because the Bucs are missing 2 defensive starters. Cansey, the interior defensive tackle, kind of a hybrid guy at times, and Winfield, the safety, the all-pro safety, is out as well. Appreciate you guys' time, man. If you think other Lions fans would enjoy this preview, this film study / commentary look at how the Lions defense can match up with what I believe is a talented and efficient Tampa Bay Bucs offense, then please consider grabbing a link to this video, sharing it out on social media to help this content get more reach.